Something wild just went down in the world of hip-hop, and honestly, this might be one of the messiest feuds of the entire year. Mariah the Scientist, yes, the same Mariah everyone once called the quiet genius of R&B, has found herself standing in the middle of a social media explosion. Viral clips from New York Fashion Week. Jailhouse audio leaks from Young Thug. GloRilla turning words into full-blown diss tracks. And now, out of nowhere, Young Miami stepping into the fire to defend Mariah, while mocking GloRilla for being a colorist. What started as a few playful lyrical jabs has mutated into a storm of betrayal, shade, and cultural commentary. It is no longer about who dropped the hardest verse, it is about colorism, female loyalty, and whether GloRilla crossed a line that could destroy her reputation forever. Social media has gone completely insane. Twitter threads are dissecting every lyric. TikTok creators are acting out the beef in full-on skits. And in the middle of all this chaos, the city girls are now tangled in the drama, adding a whole new layer to the madness. But before this feud spiraled into what looks like an emotional wildfire, we have to rewind, because Mariah's story did not begin with Thug or with any of this drama. Mariah the Scientist is not just some rapper's girlfriend. She is a prodigy, the girl who graduated high school at 16, the artist who built her name on raw talent and unshakable grace. She fought her way up, not through clout, but through intellect and skill. So when GloRilla came out swinging, calling her Tweety Bird in a diss, it did not sound like simple shade. It hit deeper, like an attack on everything Mariah represents: intelligence, class, and endurance. Because while Thug battles his RICO case, Mariah has been holding her ground, standing tall through public humiliation, internet gossip, and every insult thrown her way. She is still touring, still selling out venues, still proving that grace under pressure is power. That is why, when GloRilla crossed the line, Young Miami felt the need to step in. Miami did not just see a diss, she saw colorism hiding between the bars. And when she called it out, fans knew this was not just about rap anymore. But let us rewind to how this all began. Mariah walked into Laquan Smith's New York Fashion Week show looking like she had just stepped out of a dream: platinum blonde hair, bold cutout dress, the kind of confidence that silences a room. The guest list was legendary: Ty Dolla $ign, Lotto, Ice Spice, Lil' Kim, even Wendy Williams made a rare appearance. The cameras could not get enough. But then, social media did what social media does best. The same clip that fashion blogs were celebrating turned into a battlefield online. GloRilla threw the first punch, calling Mariah Tweety Bird. That one comment exploded across the internet within hours. Memes, hashtags, fan wars. What looked like a casual jab suddenly became a digital wildfire. And just when everyone thought it would fade away, GloRilla took it to the booth. Over the beat of Young Jock's classic "It's Goin' Down," she unleashed a diss that hit every nerve possible. She mocked Young Thug's style, his voice, even twisted his name into Young Bug. But then, she went for Mariah. She called her brain small, mocked her for staying loyal to Thug despite his cheating rumors, and threw bars so personal that fans gasped mid-scroll. Beauty and the Freak lookin' at B, brain size of a P lookin' at B. I don't care if he cheating at B, long as he come home to me lookin' at B. The internet did not just react, it erupted. Fans were shocked not just by the lyrics, but by the betrayal. Because just months earlier, GloRilla and Mariah had shared the same stage at Hot 107.9's birthday bash in Atlanta. They laughed together, hugged, looked like sisters. And now? GloRilla was publicly humiliating her. She called it just rap. But the fans did not buy it. Because when Thug's leaked jailhouse call surfaced, everything changed. The world finally heard the real reason GloRilla was angry, and suddenly this beef was no longer about music, it was personal. When that jailhouse call leaked, the internet froze. In the recording, Young Thug's voice dripped with raw honesty and venom. He was talking to Mariah, and he did not hold back. Every word sounded like a blade. He called GloRilla ugly. He mocked her wig, her frame, even her head shape. Long ass bougie wig, skinny frame, big head, big mouth, he said coldly. I would never pursue her. Those words hit like bullets. Because think about it, 1 week, the world is comparing you to Rihanna, calling you the next big thing, and the next week, one of Atlanta's biggest rappers publicly laughs at the idea of even finding you attractive. The humiliation was radioactive. The internet replayed that clip like it was an Olympic event, over and over, dissecting every tone, every laugh. And when fans realized that Mariah was laughing along in the background, that was it. For GloRilla, that was not just embarrassment. That was betrayal on tape. So when she stormed into the booth, she did not come to play. That diss track was not just rap. It was revenge. It was her striking back after being clowned in front of millions, by a man behind bars and the woman he was calling from jail. She even flipped the narrative, claiming Thug had tried to flirt with her once, twisting that story back in his face with brutal bars. But the part that truly shook people was her attack on Mariah. She painted her as a woman who tolerated anything, as long as she could keep the girlfriend title. Fans could feel the bitterness bleeding through every lyric. This was no longer a diss, it was a wound turned into rhythm. When the call went viral, Thug panicked. He scrambled for damage control, hopping onto X to post an apology that felt almost desperate. "First of all, I am sorry to you for my words," he wrote. "I honestly do not think you are ugly. I was just having a hard time in jail. I do not bash women and hardly ever did. I am sorry to you, twin." "Not twin," one fan commented. "You called her every name under the sun 2 days ago." And that became the running joke. "Not twin" trended for hours. Because by the time Thug tried to clean up his mess, it was far too late. GloRilla had already turned his insult into marketing gold. She dropped a freestyle teaser on Instagram titled "Ugly But Unbothered," and the views skyrocketed. Meanwhile, Mariah was spiraling in a completely different way. Her album Heart Sold Separately had just dropped in August. She was announcing her 2026 tour, lining up press interviews, brand partnerships, everything was falling into place. And then boom, instead of headlines about her success, the internet was calling her Tweety Bird with a pea-sized brain, mocking her for laughing on the phone while her man trashed another woman. The optics were brutal. But then, the energy shifted. Out of nowhere, young Miami appeared, and the entire tone of the internet changed. A clip went viral of her recording Mariah mid-conversation, both of them laughing. Miami paused for a moment and said, "You see this? That is real confidence." And then, right there, Mariah stuck out her tongue, smiled, and kept talking like she had not just been the internet's main character for a week. It was subtle. It was quick. But fans lost their minds. That 15-second clip did what a whole PR team could not, it flipped the narrative. Suddenly, Mariah was not the victim of ridicule, she was the woman who stayed unbothered while the world burned around her. Miami hyped her up like a sister, reposted her pictures, commented with "real queen energy," and fans ate it up. But it did not stop there. Miami started dropping subtle shade toward GloRilla, asking why her disses always circled back to skin tone and looks instead of actual talent. And that hit home, because colorism in hip-hop has always been a quiet war. Fans began connecting dots. One tweet read, "Since GloRilla wants to be a colorist, this you? Mariah looks way better. Even Whoopi Goldberg looks better. Girl, be for real." Another person said, "GloRilla's colorism shows every time she beefs with someone. It is in her tone, her insults, her energy." That was when young Miami's defense stopped being just support. It became a movement. She was no longer defending a friend, she was calling out an entire cultural sickness. By standing next to Mariah, she forced the conversation into uncomfortable but necessary places. And here is what made it even deeper. Miami had already been supporting Mariah's album rollout in Atlanta weeks earlier, alongside Queen Naija. So when she showed up again, it was not random. It was loyalty. Real loyalty. The kind you rarely see in the industry anymore. Miami has lived through public humiliation herself, being dragged online, mocked for her looks, for her voice, for her relationships. She knows that sting. And when she saw the internet trying to tear Mariah apart, she decided to be the wall that would not let the hate pass through. That moment, that simple act of solidarity, shifted everything. Because in a culture that thrives on female rivalry, watching one woman publicly protect another felt revolutionary. Most people did not even realize what they were witnessing. They thought it was another petty rap feud. Another messy viral week. But this was deeper. It was about respect. It was about identity. It was about who gets defended and who gets laughed at in hip-hop's digital coliseum. And in that moment, young Miami made a silent statement, one that echoed louder than any diss track. When the whole world laughs at you, sometimes, you only need one person not to laugh. At first, Mariah was just the girl caught in the middle of Thug's mess, another name tangled in hip-hop's endless web of drama. But then, something unexpected happened. Young Miami flipped the entire narrative. Instead of Mariah being painted as the girlfriend who stayed quiet while her man clowned another woman, Miami reframed her as the woman worth protecting. A woman too talented, too intelligent, and too self-made to ever be reduced to a Tweety Bird punchline. And that is when people started to notice something shifting, not just in tone, but in conscience. The same jokes that had everyone laughing a week ago suddenly stopped being funny. The same memes that had gone viral started feeling mean. What once felt like internet humor now sounded like cruelty disguised as culture. Because once the smoke cleared, people began actually listening to what GloRilla said, and more importantly, what she did not say. That is when the word colorist started floating through the timeline, slowly at first, then all at once. It did not come out of nowhere. Fans had receipts. People noticed the difference in how Glo went after Young Thug versus how she went after Mariah. With Thug, she swung wild, mocking his dreads, his skirts, his flamboyance. It was savage but still part of the rap arena. But when she turned to Mariah, the tone changed. It was no longer about music. It was about features. Skin. Looks. The kind of subtle digs that hit generations of women before Mariah ever stepped in front of a microphone. And that is when the conversation got heavy. Because even if Glo never said it directly, the undertone was screaming. The way she delivered those bars, the way her energy shifted when it came to Mariah, it said everything. Fans started digging through old interviews, pulling out quotes where Glo had called herself a red bone like it was a crown. Like it made her special, superior. Almost as if her complexion had become her confidence. Suddenly, people began to notice a pattern, how her self-praise always came at the expense of darker-skinned women. And that is why those Tweety Bird and Winnie the Pooh lines hit differently. They were not just shade. They were echoes of something deeper, something rooted in the kind of beauty hierarchy hip-hop rarely wants to talk about. And the internet? It did what it always does, it split into two worlds. On one side, you had the defenders, it is just rap. Stop being sensitive. Battle bars are supposed to cut deep. But on the other side, the louder, more aware side, fans were not letting it slide. They pointed out that there is a difference between wordplay and weaponizing someone's insecurity. Between roasting someone's skill and dragging their complexion through the dirt. And that is where Miami's presence became a turning point. Because she understood that difference instinctively. Her defense of Mariah was not just loyalty, it was principle. She was standing up for a woman who was being diminished in public not for her music, but for her melanin. And when Miami speaks, people listen. She is not polished or overly rehearsed, she is raw, unfiltered, and real. When she talks, it does not sound like PR. It sounds like truth. And that truth began to ripple through the timeline like thunder. Suddenly, the same freestyle that fans had been quoting for laughs started to sound ugly. Clips that once felt entertaining started feeling loaded. You could see it in the comment sections, the hesitation, the discomfort. The internet was realizing it had laughed a little too quickly, shared a little too freely. Some fans tried to push back. Not every light-skinned rapper talking slick is a colorist, they said. But context matters. And Glo's context was catching up to her. Her history of bars like light skin, pretty teeth, and her repeated self-comparisons that placed her above the next woman, all of it started to form a picture people could no longer ignore. And when you pair that with her dissing Mariah, a darker-skinned woman known for her depth, her emotion, her artistry, the optics became painful. It was no longer just a diss. It was a mirror, reflecting decades of the same wounds black women in hip-hop have been forced to carry. People began resurfacing old clips, old interviews, Lauryn Hill talking about beauty bias, Kelly Rowland opening up about being compared to Beyoncé, and countless other women whose light had been dimmed by an industry obsessed with shade, literally and figuratively. This stopped being about GloRilla and Mariah. It became a cultural reckoning, about who gets protected and who gets picked apart. And that is what made Miami's timing so powerful. She did not come online swinging insults. She simply showed up, beside Mariah, not behind her. She reminded everyone that Mariah is not a meme or a punchline. She is a writer. A performer. A woman who built her artistry from the ground up without needing to tear anyone else down. And somehow, that simple gesture, standing beside another woman, felt revolutionary. Because in a culture where rivalry sells and unity is seen as weakness, Miami's act of loyalty became its own form of rebellion. It was no longer Glo versus Mariah. It was sisterhood versus shade. And for the first time in a long time, hip-hop was forced to look at itself, not just through the bars, but through the bruises. The internet may be unpredictable, but loyalty cuts through algorithms like a heartbeat. When young Miami stood up for Mariah, the energy online shifted. You could see it in the comments, fans writing, "Finally, someone said it." Others typed, "That's real friendship right there." In a digital world that survives on tearing women apart, watching one woman defend another hit like a breath of fresh air. It was rare. It was raw. It was real. And maybe that was what made it so powerful, because Miami has lived through that kind of pain. She knows what it feels like to be mocked, misunderstood, turned into a meme. To have your private moments twisted into public spectacle. So when she stepped up for Mariah, it did not feel performative, it felt personal. That one moment reframed everything. For Mariah, it was redemption, a comeback written in silence, not scandal. For Miami, it was a reminder of why people respect her, because she moves with authenticity, even when it is messy. And in that authenticity, she forced the culture to face something it has avoided for far too long, the way colorism hides in plain sight, disguised as entertainment. Suddenly, the internet grew quiet, not because it lost interest, but because it got uncomfortable. Influencers began dissecting it in think pieces. Podcast hosts argued whether GloRilla's comments were colorist or just careless. Male rappers jumped in, trying to water it down. Y'all always make everything about skin tone. But women knew better. They heard the dog whistles loud and clear, because they have lived them. Every backhanded compliment. Every time someone said, "You're pretty for a dark-skinned girl." Every moment where beauty standards made them invisible while the world celebrated someone else for existing a few shades lighter. It all echoed in this one rap feud. What started as entertainment became education. People were unpacking decades of conditioning through tweets, TikToks, and threads. It stopped being about Glo. It became about the system that taught her words could sound normal, that made this kind of insult feel harmless. Fans began revisiting Mariah's music, this time really listening. They started to see her not as a headline, but as a mirror, reflecting every dark-skinned woman who has had to fight twice as hard to be seen as beautiful, to be respected for her art. Mariah's pain became collective. Her silence became symbolic. And when she stayed quiet through it all, no diss track, no clapback, no messy subtweets, her silence turned into power. Every post she made after that was flooded with love. "We see you. Keep shining, queen." The same people who laughed days earlier were now defending her with fire. That is how fast the internet turns, but this time, it turned in her favor. Meanwhile, GloRilla tried to move on, dropping new freestyles, posting new photo shoots, but the energy had changed. Her comments were filled with criticism instead of praise. The laughter was gone. Every bar she spit was dissected for hidden shade, for colorist undertones. She said it wasn't that deep, but by then, the damage was already done. The narrative had escaped her hands. Because once the label colorist sticks in hip-hop, it does not fade, it festers. It becomes the whisper behind every new drop, every interview, every brand deal. In an industry where image is everything, that kind of stain can end careers faster than bad music ever could. And yet, through the chaos, Mariah stood untouched, glowing, composed, elevated. Miami did not delete her posts. She did not backtrack. She did not soften her stance. In a culture where everyone is terrified to pick sides, she planted her flag and said, "I said what I said." And that quiet defiance, that refusal to fold, resonated like thunder. Because sometimes, the loudest act of rebellion is not shouting, it is standing beside someone the world is trying to isolate. Within days, major outlets began covering it. Headlines like, "The Colorism Conversation Hip-Hop Needed," and "Mariah the Scientist," from Target to Triumph, started circulating. And for once, Mariah's name was not attached to gossip or a man's drama, it was attached to grace. People began rewatching her old performances, realizing her stage presence was magnetic, her lyrics poetic, her delivery raw and intentional. Ironically, what began as an insult became a reintroduction. The world saw her again, not as a meme, not as a punchline, but as a force. And for GloRilla, things were not the same. The laughter had turned to side eyes. Her once celebrated realness began to feel like bitterness. And in hip-hop, perception is everything. As for Miami and Mariah, that moment bonded them. Two women, two survivors of